An urban legend that may have started on the internet. Black-eyed children showing up unexpectedly. Children that seem weirdly out of place and out of time, asking for your landline or your telegraph. Have you ever heard of the Black-Eyed Kids?
You're about to.
From a child born into this world, we are taught what to believe. Closed-minded we become, fearful to be deceived. Still we desire to know what lies beyond that locked door. The art of the storyteller, conjuring tales of legend and lore. History hidden, lost knowledge, things forgotten and the unknown. These are the things that direct us and will set the tone. Welcome, friends, to another episode of Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
So the Black-Eyed Kids is a contemporary urban legend. Some people say it started on the internet as a creepy pasta or pasta, depending on how you want to pronounce that word.
Ooh, I like pasta.
Well, on the internet, that's sort of a slang term for a short story that gets passed along. Those things you get emails like, you're not going to believe this.
Oh, I hate those.
Yeah, you get the little stories. But the Black-Eyed Kids sort of first popped up on the internet, I think, sometime in the 90s. Of course, tabloids would claim that the Black-Eyed Kids have been around since before that. And I think as we delve deeper into the story, we're even going to say that maybe Black-Eyed Kids, or at least stories of similar entities or creatures, have been around for forever, like all of mankind's history.
Centuries.
We could go back to the Fae stories and things like that. So the Black-Eyed Kids typically will appear between 6 to 16 years old. They'll have pale skin, and as per the namesake, they'll have jet black eyes, no coloration whatsoever, no white, no distinguishing feature, just pure black in the eye. They wear drab clothes. I think the most common outfit described is a hoodie and jeans. Or sometimes they'll be old-fashioned, similar to like how the Amish would dress. One of the stories I have even mentions that the husband thought maybe they were Mennonites. They usually travel in pairs, sometimes in groups. Rarely will you encounter just one, but it's not unheard of. Sometimes they do appear singularly. Usually they'll be hitchhiking or panhandling. Again, the most common version of this story is the kids will knock on the door and they'll ask to use your telephone or telegraph. Again, like I said, they seem like they're out of time.
Out of time, yeah. And they also seem to be more boys than gender to female versions.
Typically,
as well.
more often it seems to be boys. They will insist on being let inside, and they'll tell you, that they're not dangerous. They usually have a monotone kind of voice. Let us in. We won't hurt you. This won't take long. I've encountered stories where, we don't have any weapons with which to hurt you, things like that. So obviously, they try to make you feel at ease, but again, when someone tells you, I don't have any weapons to hurt you.
Not working so much, not working so much.
Those that encounter them always speak of this same sense of dread. There's something off about these kids. They immediately make you feel uncomfortable. So with a little bit of background there, let's kind of delve into some anecdotes. Now, the first story that pops up on the internet, the Black-Eyed Kids, is from 1996 by a Texas reporter named Brian Bethel from Abilene. And supposedly he recounts the first known story of an encounter with Black-Eyed Kids. He was sitting in his vehicle late one evening. He had stopped in a parking lot outside of a movie theater to write a check. 2 children tapped on his driver's side window. He felt terrified immediately. He looks over, he sees these kids, he feels like they're out of place, out of time, something's just wrong. He feels terrified, but he rolls down the window a little bit. The oldest kid says that he and his brother, they wanted to watch a movie, but they didn't have their money. They'd left their money at home, and they asked him for a ride home so they could go get their money. They assured him, again, this is the Black-Eyed Kids, they said, it'll be okay, mister.
We're not going to hurt you.
Yeah, we're not going to hurt you. We don't even have a gun to hurt you with. I mean, I think they use that exactly.
I read that too. We don't have a gun. It's like, okay, why would you imply that?
How unsettling. Yeah, we don't have a gun.
We don't have a gun.
You shouldn't have to say that. But again, he even found their assurances to be completely unnerving. When he broke eye contact with them, that's when his fear seemed to become all-encompassing. He knew he had to get away from these kids. He didn't want anything to do with them. This was not someplace he needed to be or wanted to be. They became frustrated when he would make excuses for not giving them a ride. And they specifically said, we cannot be let inside unless you invite us. Which, if you're familiar with your vampire lore...
Absolutely.
Vampires have to be invited in, according to some versions of the story. They can't come in unless they're invited. So again, we'd say the Black-Eyed Kids, these stories exist from way back in mankind's past, vampire lore goes back. Every culture has vampires.
Way beyond 1990s, for sure.
Yeah. But, I have an entire book that's probably 3 to 4 inches thick at home just about vampire lore from all over the world. So, I mean, every culture has a vampire story.
And not only that, you've got to let me in, I've got to be invited. Kind of a death-like pale toned skin, the whole black eyes. Some say it's like recessed, almost like a skull look. Again, it kind of sounds undeadish.
They have a vampirish look about them even. I believe we both have a series of anecdotes here, so if you want to take the next one.
Oh, absolutely. I found a story, and we're going to call this man Noetic. Noetic didn't want his real name used, but he's working night shift. This is back in 2010.
We can sympathize with that.
Yeah, right? Don't use my real name. It was an ordinary July night in Ohio, and Noetic was in the middle of his night shift. He started craving a cigarette. So he decides he's going to step out front of the building and steps out on the street and lights up his cigarette. And across the street there, kind of in an alley, are 2 teenage boys. He describes that just start looking at him. He doesn't think a lot about it. I mean, he stepped outside the building. They were over there. Maybe he kind of alarmed them or, got their attention. But then they start crossing the street. They keep their heads down, and as Bill described, often these are wearing drabbier clothes, got hoodies kind of pulled over, so not really exposing their heads.
Yeah, they tend to want to not stand out, I think.
Yeah, kind of blend in, fade into the shadows. As they're walking across the street, he gets a glimpse, however, and he just, the hair on the back of his neck kind of stands up. He gets this uneasy feeling, and he starts to see one of them as they raise their head, and again, you see these jet black eyes, kind of faceless or motionless face expressions. So he darts back inside the office door, which I'm assuming locks automatically without a key badge or something is kind of implied, and runs back to his cubicle. He's decided he's had enough cigarette. But where he's at in his cubicle, he has security cameras. So he is able to see these 2 teenage black-eyed kids outside the office building there, and they're like motioning, trying to get his attention, like to let them in. So he kind of...
Even if the door doesn't lock, that may go back to they have to be invited.
Have to be invited to come in, absolutely. Vampire, I'm telling you, it's vampire. So after a while, he kind of starts getting aggravated. He's like, these teenagers need to go away. So he gets up out of his cubicle, he goes back down, and he's looking at them. Well, now he gets to face them right on. There's lighting. He can see both of them has these jet black eyes, no pupils whatsoever, and they're hollering at him through, and they're like, let me in, I won't hurt you. And so in his mind, I thought this was kind of weird, in his mind he's thinking, this is where I need to go call the police. He doesn't say anything out loud, but one of these kids is like speaking back to him through the glass, that wouldn't be a good idea to call the police.
Well, I hadn't found anything about like mind reading.
Yes, so again, maybe. And so at this point, this kind of sets the guy over edge. And so he races back to his cubicle, picks up the phone, calling the police, staring at the video surveillance screen, doesn't take his eyes off, and the 2 boys are out there, they're like beating on the glass. The cops arrive, walk right through them.
Ooh, I hadn't heard one like that either.
So he goes down to meet them, and again, he saw them on the screen, he sees the cops arrive, but he gets down there, the cops are there, there's no sign of any of the kids.
Wow.
That's kind of creepy.
I had the psychic and the ghostly even maybe. I hadn't read any like that.
The police are like, we didn't see anybody. We pulled up. I don't know how many cops came, but they came up, clear line of sight through the street, didn't see anybody. But yeah, I thought that was really creepy. That wouldn't be a good idea to call the cops when he didn't say it out loud.
Well, again, and they give the reassurances. You said they oh no, we're not going to hurt you. We're not going to hurt. I mean, as an average adult, you shouldn't be afraid of a kid anyway.
Right? Why would you say that? I'm not going to hurt you. That implies you're going to hurt me.
Well, I have an encounter here from Lisburn, Northern Ireland. We're going to roam a little far afield here. And again, we talked about Fae, and this is sort of the birthplace of those kinds of stories. We're familiar with that. A young woman by the name of Karis Holdsworth was walking to her apartment from a friend's apartment. It was about 10:45 on a warm evening, and she was just strolling. Now, she didn't live in the best part of town, so she was always kind of on edge as she walked through her neighborhood.
Makes sense.
She noticed there were 2 teenagers in hoodies and jeans in her backyard. They kind of had their backs to her as she approached. Now, again, she doesn't live in the greatest neighborhood. She kind of knows that some shady things go down from time to time. So she immediately, she goes on edge and kind of gets on the defensive. She reaches into her purse, where she's got pepper spray. And she grabs onto that. She's ready to spray them if she has to.
Uh-oh.
She grabs the pepper spray, and kind of as she's grabbing the pepper spray, they both turn to look at her. And that's when she saw their faces. Of course, they have the black eyes, the black-eyed children again. And they say, oh, there's no need for that. So I guess maybe I did touch on the psychic thing. I
A little bit. Didn't pick up
But
on
yeah,
it.
it was in her bag, and they immediately tell her, there's no need for that. We just want to borrow your phone. And she, again, saw the pitch black eyes. She's terrified.
We're innocent.
Yeah. So she runs for her apartment. She runs for the apartment door. She gets past these kids. She gets in. She locks the door without them getting in behind her. They continue to kind of hang around the door. They want to get in. Hey, let us in. Let us in. We just want to borrow your phone. We just want to borrow your phone. She locks the door. Again, locked door. She calls her friend that she just left their house. She knew they were awake. She calls them and says, hey, you come over here. And she kind of explains the situation. So they're like, yeah, we'll drive by. So her friend hops in the car and drives over to see what's going on. Now, as the friend drives up, the friend describes seeing these two kids, and she never sees their faces.
Okay.
She's just driving up. And they run off as she pulls up.
But she sees them where the cops pulled up in my
she
story.
saw them.
Didn't see them at all. Okay.
And she felt the unreasonable fear that people feel when they encounter the black-eyed kids.
Interesting.
But they do run off as she pulls up. So, again, this encounter, a little bit different, but they do seem to have the ability to know what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And again, someone who was totally unrelated to the original encounter saw them and was explaining that horror. So you don't even have to see the face to feel that uncomfortable fear.
Interesting. I've got another one I'll share with you. This was one particular night. One night, a man was dozing in the spare room with his infant daughter when he heard a strange bump outside the house. So he gets up. Small child lays the daughter down, gets up, goes and investigates, thinking it's the house cat that's outside on the front porch. Checks through the window, opens the door, looks, no sign of anything, no sign of the cat. He dismisses it. As he turns to walk back to the daughter's bedroom, however, comes into the kitchen area, and the back door, there are two teenage boys, once again, age 10 to 11-ish, and they're knocking on the door. And this is one of those examples where, he opens, I guess, the door, but not the screen door. So he's looking at them through the glass, and they ask to use the telegraph. Again, kind of out of time.
Like they're out of touch with modern reality.
One of the boys looks up at the man and says, "Can we use your telegraph?" To his horror, when he looks up, he sees again these black-eyed. Both of these young boys have total black eyes, no facial expressions. And he notices a musty, mildewy smell through this screen door.
Like the grave.
Yes, very vampiric, I'm telling you. And he says, well, I'm sorry, the house doesn't have service, because the telegraph thing kind of threw him off. So he's like,
yeah, I mean, how many houses have telegraph service?
My house was built much after that. Sorry, we don't have service here. So that odd remark kind of stuck with him, but he just closed the door on their face, basically. I'm sorry, the house doesn't have service. And he goes back down to check on his daughter, who's trying to go to sleep in the spare bedroom. And then all of a sudden, these kids somehow know which room he goes to in the house and go outside the kid's window and starts beating on the window. And
a little bit of that psychicness again.
Again, yeah. He freaks out. He grabs his small daughter, who he's, again, trying to put down to go to sleep, and says he literally just kind of holds her all night long. He sets in the floor with his back against the interior wall, and I guess these knocks, these thumps continue almost like every 2 to 3 minutes, and they get more angry and aggressive. He shouts at them, "Go away, leave us alone," and all this, and they just keep up. And at this point, he's kind of wondering, this is just some pranksters, some thug kids, whatever. But they stay there the rest of the night. Sounds like several hours. He dozes off to sleep somehow and is awakened by his wife's alarm clock going off, where she had set it apparently. Now, there's no mention of the wife. I don't know if she's at work, and this was just kind of a weird deal.
Or maybe she slept through it.
I don't know. But the alarm clock goes off, and when he awakes, he hears the knocking. But after the alarm clock ends, it's like the eeriness is lifted, the heaviness is lifted, the knocking ended, and the boys are gone.
Well, did you stumble upon any stories that happened during the day?
I think maybe you had one you were telling me about, didn't you?
No, all mine are at night. Maybe that's something that goes along with it. You said, the wife's alarm clock goes off in the morning.
Well, again, vampire, you're not going to be up at sunrise. So That's interesting. Yeah, another one.
All right.
Got another story?
I've got one here. It's an airman, while he was stationed in Texas. He didn't want to go into a lot of detail, obviously, because of the nature of his job and the fact that people who knew him might poke fun at him. He didn't run, so he kind of remained anonymous a little bit. This guy's a big guy. He's 6'7", 260 pounds.
Big boy.
Says prior special forces, which I didn't think they were in the Air Force, but maybe someone got their details a little crossed here.
Could be.
He was staying in a dorm when he heard a knock on his dorm door. It starts out originally with a knock. He hears a knock. Now, they had common shower areas, and he thought maybe someone was in the shower. They sort of had the way he described it was Jack and Jill doors. I'm not sure what that means. I'm assuming it means like saloon door type swinging doors.
Okay.
So he checked the shower to see if somebody was in there, and there was no one there. He was going to dismiss it when he heard the knock again. So he goes over to the dorm door, and there's a peephole about halfway down the door. So he looks through the peephole. He sees a boy about 17, 18 years of age, and he asks the kid, he says, "What's up?" Well, the boy looks up, and the way he described it was a smile that was cruel or hungry looking.
We do have facial expressions.
Very unsettling, yes. And then again, he felt the terror as soon as he saw the kid. Now, this is a big guy. I said 6'7", 260, special forces. This guy is supposed to be the toughest of the tough.
He can take care of himself and others.
This teenage boy makes him afraid. So,
bit odd.
The boy again asks to use the phone, and he just tells him no. He's just brusque. Nope. And he turns around and he goes back. He's going to go back to bed. So the kid knocks again. He goes back over. He opens the door. He figures he's going to intimidate this kid. He's, again, 6'7", 260. This is a big guy. He's going to intimidate him. You need to leave me the hell alone.
Right.
He opens the door, and he feels uneasy. He's still got that fear from the exposure to the black-eyed kids. The kid looks up again at him, and again, he sees the black eyes, and he just knows there's something wrong here. He's terrified. He smiles at him with that predatory smile yet again.
That's creepy.
And eventually, he just tells him, "No, you gotta take off, man." And he just closes the door, and he just ignores, any knocking after that. Now, the interesting part about this particular story is that this airman believes that he had seen the same kid once before. 2 years prior, he'd lived in Pennsylvania. He was working at a gas station on the overnight shift. His brother was there with him, and they were just outside getting a smoke, killing some time, just relaxing. I guess they weren't very busy, again, late at night. When this kid crosses 4 lanes of highway and starts walking across and gets to about where the gas pumps are in front of the store, and the brother yells out to him, "Hey, buddy, you need anything?" And the kid, as usual, "Can I use your phone?" The brother looks up, tells him it's not for customers. It's in the shop. It's not for customers. It's behind the counter. They got to pay a phone out front or whatever if you need to use the phone.
Payphone, that's a thing of the past almost anymore.
So the kid keeps coming towards them, though. He just keeps walking across the where the pumps are.
He seems
keeps coming
dedicated.
Towards
He walks across 4 lanes of traffic. He's dedicated.
So they both go inside, and this kid goes right up to the glass in the front of the store, right in front of where the counter's at, and starts knocking on the glass, keeps asking to use the phone. "Hey, let me in. I need to use the phone. Just let me in."
Oh, hell no.
And he does this for about 5 minutes or so. The younger brother goes in to get a baseball bat. I guess they keep a bat behind the counter or whatever. He goes to grab that bat, and by the time he comes back around out the front door, this kid's gone. They don't even see him. They don't know where he went. He's gone. So again, another one of those nighttime encounters, and this one seemed to react to being attacked. Like maybe, he read the intent in the brain and decided to get out of there.
And maybe he decided to follow up with the guy since he tried to threaten him many years later.
Yeah, that's the strange part about this one, is the guy swears it was the same kid 2 years later.
That's the first time I've heard of that. I've got another one here that's just, it's almost not the same, but it is black eyes.
Is this the one that's like the horror story?
No, I'm going to get to that one later.
Okay.
This one we're going to call Cryptic Beauty. One evening, a recluse living area in British Columbia. Gentleman decided to go see a scary movie flick at the local movie theater. So, of course, he's already on edge because of the film. He gets home, kind of setting himself there in the chair, and he hears a knock on the door shortly after he gets there. With each step, as he gets closer to the door, he just feels this dread, this scariness, this uneasiness, this heaviness. And basically to the point where he says he's just almost petrified in fear before he even reaches for the door handle. And now he doesn't even know what's on the other side yet. So, nevertheless, something compelled him to open the door. Standing there on the front porch was what he described as a beautiful teenage girl with long flowing blonde hair. Not the typical hoodie, Doesn't really cover her
A
face.
really ordinary drab appearance.
Yeah, and she looks up and does have the recessed black eyes. That's the connection, but long flowing blonde hair, not dressed necessarily in drab clothing. And he says he guesses that she was probably close to 6 feet tall, very tall for the age. Doesn't say an exact age, but again, it fit kind of within that 16-ish, young teenager. Very polite. May I enter the premises? A little different.
That's a little formal.
The man kind of looks at her and sees the black eyes, begins to be horrified. Again, just watch this scary movie. He screams and slams the door in her face. He marched up to his bedroom, pulled out a gun, and sat in the chair in the living room facing the door. Obviously, he didn't want to go open the door again, but he has a gun and he's ready to use it. Hours pass, and finally he hears a commotion outside, and it's the mailman. Now, obviously, this must be daylight, to our point earlier. Yeah. The mailman usually doesn't deliver at night, and so he goes out and retrieves the mail. There's no sign of this girl anywhere. He does mention there's no signs of footprints anywhere, so I don't know if he doesn't say if it was winter and there was snow or what made him think there could be footprints, but there was no sign. But as he's walking up with the mail, he's looking, and on the screen door was etched the word soon, S-O-O-N.
Ooh.
So kind of creepy, but similar, but different.
Well, I've got one more account that I want to get into, but it's a little different from the rest. If you want to go ahead and...
Okay,
you
sure.
said you have one more there?
This one I had to share. This is just crazy. This was November 19th, 1992. Man was watching Evil Dead.
Which is a horror classic.
Horror classic.
I'm sorry, I can't let you say that without talking about how great the Evil Dead is.
For those of you who might not know Evil Dead, surely to goodness you saw the iconic figure of a man with a chainsaw as a hand.
Yeah.
That's
it may be cheesy, and it's definitely dated, but still.
Yeah. So he and his wife and children, his cool family, watching Evil Dead together.
Hey, we do that in my house.
They're upstairs watching the movie. It was about 1:30 a.m. when he decided to head to bed after the movie was over. Suddenly, there's a loud pounding on the front door, and what stood behind the door would change his life forever. There stood a boy and girl, ages 8 and 11, the girl being 11, the boy being around 8, respectively. They never look up at him. This is in Michigan, and it is the winter time. The main thing he notices is looking down. These kids are barefoot in the snow in Michigan in the winter. Despite his anger, the man allowed the children to enter when they asked to come in because they were cold. And again, who wouldn't? I mean,
Yeah, you're going to feel compelled to let those kids in.
Out there freezing. But as they come through the door, they raise their heads up, and he gets to see this stereotypical.
Okay, so he does let them in.
He lets them in. So this is another instance of where he lets them in. They asked to use their phone and said they're trying to contact their parents. And there's kind of some dead silence. They are walking over towards the phone. He allows them to use the phone, and then he hears a scream coming from the upstairs bedroom. So of course he races off. He leaves the kids downstairs. He doesn't know. This ends up being his wife. He met with the sight of his wife in a pool of blood and terrifying sounds of bones snapping and flesh ripping. And he saw the bare feet of the children he had just let in his home with blood like had left there. But he left them downstairs. This is upstairs.
That is...
So he sees his wife in blood, and there's these bare footprints in the blood.
Ugh.
And not to mention bone snapping, flesh ripping. Despite the man's best efforts, he was trying to get around, check on the kids and everything. When the act was done, the door slowly creaks open, and there stood the barefoot children in the hallway. So now they're upstairs again. It was like they're just kind of teleporting or blinking, if you will. Both of the kids are literally covered in blood. They stood defiantly, he says, with awful grins and eyes completely like the devil himself, is the words that he uses.
I almost feel like we've crossed the line from like folktale to like full-on horror movie.
Definitely. Now, I will say this story, obviously, it's different in many ways.
Pretty extreme.
But it doesn't have a continuation. It doesn't say now the children disappear. He shoots the children. The wife dies. The wife is okay. There's no follow-up. So
that one,
I'm not real sure how to take
kind
this
of
one.
on the edge of believability.
Yes.
It's pretty extreme.
I think this might be one of those examples of the urban legend and maybe elevated to the next level. But cool story nevertheless.
Yeah, again, this is kind of a, they say that this really only has its origins in the 80s. And again, I think we hinted at the beginning, you could reach back a lot longer than that. But still, yeah, like your story there, that's kind of the extreme
That's demonic aspect. And I know you've got another story to share, but one of the things we had talked about, we've touched on vampire possibilities, but going back in old folklore, especially overseas, some of this is like dark fae. Some of those old stories where the fae of the forest, and stuff would lure people in. I mean, you got Rumpelstiltskin and folk fairy tales and stuff. The ring of mushrooms that some, unbeknownst bypasser would stumble into, fall asleep, and the fae would play pranks on them and stuff like that. So I think that's a possibility of a link too that maybe has just been revised. My thoughts.
Well, I've got one last anecdote here, where they do let the kids in, and it kind of is a tale of tragedy. It's not quite as extreme as the one you related there,
blood and gore.
But I kind of felt that this was the one that I wanted to focus on the most because it is an account where the kids get in the house and it kind of describes the events while they're there, and then afterwards. So. This is in a rural town in Vermont, just outside of town. It's a nice, quiet community. The kind of place where everybody knows everybody. No one locks their doors. It's just not, you don't need to do that. It's
like
that
Cheers.
Kind of place. Yeah.
Everyone knows your name.
Everyone knows your name, and everybody feels safe. And in this day and age, not locking your doors, I mean, nobody does that. You'd have to live in a pretty comfortable neighborhood. So I think that kind of sets the scene of how peaceful and serene and friendly this little area was.
Gotcha.
The wife wakes up to the sound of loud banging on the front door. They lived in a small house on a dirt road, so just someone knocking on the door, they're kind of out of the way. It's not like they're normally going to have a lot of passersby. And the other part is middle of a snowstorm. It's been snowing, basically all day. There's snow on the ground, inches deep. I don't remember the exact, I don't think they say exactly how deep the snow is, but a lot of snow on the ground, enough that travel is impeded. So her first thought was maybe somebody had been in a wreck. Maybe somebody needed their help and had gone off the road or something.
Slid off the ditch, yeah.
Pretty common, in places like that. So she goes and she looks out the window. She notices that their motion light is on. So obviously there's somebody out there, something out there. And she sees footprints in the snow that come from the road and go down the driveway up to the front door. So she figures definitely somebody's going to need help. She wakes up her husband and they go downstairs. So the husband answers the door. There's two children there. There's a boy and a girl. He describes them as being no more than 8 years old. They're dressed strangely, kind of out of time. They've got strange haircuts. They describe the boy as having like an old-fashioned bowl cut. The girl's hair was kind of short and cut straight. So kind of a slightly odd-looking appearance. And they were definitely not dressed for the weather. They weren't bundled in winter coats or anything. They were just kind of casually dressed. We go back to the hoodies and jeans kind of look maybe. But, sort of drab, plain clothing.
Not appropriately for the winter.
Yeah, not for a winter snowstorm. He believed they may have been Mennonite. I guess they had a Mennonite community nearby, so he thought maybe they were from that.
Based maybe on the haircuts and stuff, yeah.
Now, normal reaction, of course. You see some kids, they need some help, you want to let them in. You're going to help these kids. But they already had felt like something was off about this situation. The husband, the wife, they didn't want to let them in. That wasn't their first instinct. They said, we can't let these kids in. They were unnerving. They wouldn't make eye contact when they were talking through them. When the husband was talking to them, they would ask if they were okay, what was going on, you need help, what's the deal? And they wouldn't make any eye contact as they talked to him. But they said they asked to come in. The husband wasn't sure if he wanted them to come in. Of course, he asked where their parents were, and they responded with, well, they'll be here soon.
They'll be here soon.
And they kept saying, the parents will be here soon. So
I think it's odd. Interrupt you here just a moment. I think they're maybe trying to portray this. They're always as children. The innocence maybe is what they're trying to portray. Several of them mention parents.
Yeah, well, parents comes up quite often.
Yeah, but there's never no sign of the parents. They never come and get them. They always vanish. But it's just kind of interesting that they're always the children playing that innocent
This
role.
one kind of breaks that pattern just a little bit.
Ooh, tell me more.
So anyway, this is about 2 a.m. at this point. So you're 2 a.m., middle of a snowstorm. It's cold. It's Vermont. I mean, it's definitely not going to be pleasant weather outside.
Woke this family up, obviously.
So instinct says not to let them in, but they want to do the right thing. They want to be good Samaritans. They let them in the house. The husband takes the kids into the living room while the wife goes to make hot cocoa for them so they can figure out, they want to take care of these kids, make sure they're looked after.
It's the right thing to do.
The husband keeps asking if they're okay, how far they had walked, if their parents' car had broke down, and he keeps getting they'll be here soon. They'll be here soon. And they had kind of a sing-songy type voice is the way they described it, kind of a weird way of speaking. I mean, just everything about these kids is just a little bit off.
Now, did they ever say why these, you said 8, 9-year-old kids are out here? The parents will be here soon. They never mentioned a car. The parents are in the car. The parents are the ones that slept.
They never talk
how
about
the parents going to get here. How did the kids get here?
Yeah, they never talk about having an accident or anything like that.
Very vague. Okay.
Now for some of the red flags. They had 4 cats in this household. 3 of the cats are nowhere to be found. They can't find any of the cats. Normally the cats are very curious, very friendly. Hey, there's people in the house. Rub up on them, want to get some pets.
Yes, yes.
They're all hiding, except for one. I believe that cat was named Pigeon. He's in the kitchen with the wife.
Hold on, a cat named Pigeon?
Cat named Pigeon.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Now, normally, again, these cats are normally curious and friendly. Pigeon is standing like against the wall as far as he can be away from the living room. He's got his back arched, his fur is up, his tail is poofed up. I mean, he is.
You know what they say about cats?
Yeah, he's definitely.
Egyptians kept him for a reason.
Yeah, he's detecting something that he doesn't like. He's uncomfortable. She reaches down to pet him, and he just starts growling at her. And he like skitters off underneath the cabinets. So he is trying to get away. He doesn't want to be, part of this situation. So the wife brings the cocoa into the living room, and the first thing she sees is her husband has his head in his hands. He's not talking to the kids. He's kind of got his head down. He's sort of, there's obviously something going on with him. So she asked what's going on. He said, well, he felt really dizzy all of a sudden. He just got this super wave of dizzy feeling. And then he said he's fine, though. He'll be fine. He'll be all right.
2 a.m. in the morning, you're woke up by 2 strange kids. Yeah, you're distraught a little bit.
So she looks over at the kids. The kids look up. She sees their eyes and almost drops the mugs of cocoa on the floor. The kids have the jet black eyes. She notices that immediately. It just freaks her out, scares her. They notice her fear. That's in her words. They noticed her fear and said, may we use the restroom? And I'll stress the we part. That's a plural.
We.
So she takes them down the hall, takes them to where the restroom's at. They both go in together. Again, kind of weird. She closes
girls
the door.
do that, but not boys and girls. Yeah.
She goes back into her husband, and she's really like, "Hey, did you see their eyes?" And the husband, what he describes, he goes, "Yeah, their eyes were black. Like I guess his brother had been in an accident and smashed his face." He said it's almost like when his brother had bruised his eyes in an automobile accident. So again, they're still thinking that maybe there's an accident. There's something going on here. While she's talking to her husband, his nose starts to bleed. Now, this man hadn't been prone to nosebleeds. It wasn't something that was common. And she points that out. She's kind of panicked by it. So she goes to get some tissues. I don't know if they didn't have any handy where she goes. But as she goes to get the tissues, the lights go out. Ooh. Power goes out.
Boom.
So she turns. This kind of goes back to your story a little bit. She kind of turns as she's coming back down the hallway to bring the tissues to her husband, and she's confronted by the 2 kids standing at the end of the hallway, absolutely motionless, just sort of staring at her. They're just standing like the twins in The Shining.
In The Shining, I was thinking the same thing.
But they're just staring at her.
Now, how does she see them in the hallway if the lights are out?
Well, towards kind of like maybe backlit against the outside snow. I don't know. It's a good question. I mean,
2
it was a
a.m.
snowstorm.
in the morning.
She said she saw them. They were back. Like she saw them. They were standing motionless. After what she described as forever, quotes, quote unquote, the boy looks at her and says, "Our parents are here."
Ooh, Daddy's home.
The 2 kids turn. They walk to the door. They open it, and they just walk out into the snow. Now, the husband jumps up because he wants to, hey, if their family are here, we want to know that they're taken care of. As soon as he stands up, he almost falls over instantly, plagued by this dizziness. He just can't barely get across the room. They look out the window, and they see 2 men standing by a black car that's idling at the end of the driveway. They're wearing all black suits. They're very tall, 6 foot tall at least, both of these guys.
Wow.
The husband waves. The 2 figures stare. The kids get in the car. The men get in the car, and they drive off into the night.
The men in black.
Yeah. So the wife and the husband try to collect themselves. After about 30 minutes, the power comes on. And this is when things go bad.
They go bad now.
Yeah, this is when things start getting worse.
Oh my gosh, okay.
The urban legend, obviously, you don't let them into your home. Over the course of the next 3 months, 3 out of the 4 cats go missing. They just never to be seen again. Now, indoor, outdoor cats out in the wilderness, you can kind of dismiss some of this. Who
Maybe
knows?
one at a time, though, not 3.
Pigeon. They come home and they find their cat Pigeon laying in the living room in a puddle of blood.
Ooh.
They said it looked like he'd been vomiting blood, but just find their cat dead. So they take him to the veterinarian, and the veterinarian says, well, maybe it was some kind of hemorrhage. He can't really diagnose what was wrong, what killed their cat. So he just kind of falls back on the best thing he knows. If there's bleeding, it must be a hemorrhage. The husband starts having regular nosebleeds. Decides, you know what, this is kind of abnormal. Yeah, I'm going to go to the doctor. So the doctor brings him in. He's diagnosed with an aggressive form of skin cancer.
Wow.
Of course, the doctor asks if they ever use indoor tanning beds, and they say no, and the doctor's shocked by this, because apparently this particular form of cancer is very closely linked with the use of indoor tanning beds.
Well, as you were saying this, I was almost thinking exposed to radiation or something, maybe? You know,
Something.
the hemorrhaging, the skin cancer. Okay.
They believe he'll recover, but the thing is, they don't understand how it went from, you know, undiagnosed to as bad as it was when he got to the hospital.
Non-existent to boom.
Yeah. The wife regularly started suffering from dizzy spells and nosebleeds. She had other health issues that she didn't feel comfortable discussing. I'm not sure what that includes. But in her heart of hearts, she swears up and down it was related to letting those kids in the house.
Well, I think anybody would draw to that conclusion.
Now, this story here, you kind of touched on it. You have the Men in Black aspect, the black car, the men in the tall men dressed in black suits. There's a phenomenon with UFO encounters that they call moonburn, I think is what it's called. But it's almost like a radiation exposure when you're when you encounter a UFO.
Okay, gotcha.
So you do have that, and so we talked about the skin cancer.
Hey, it almost does sound like a radiation type exposure.
Now some theories say that maybe these kids are related to UFO and alien encounters. I mean, you've got the black eyes, and your stereotypical gray alien, has
Very
the big
good point.
black eyes.
So they could be fae, they could be vampire, they could be alien, or could be something just totally new.
So, but that's the last encounter I have to talk about. So I think at this point, we say, so you're at home. It's late at night. You're kicked back. I mean, you're a night shift guy, so it's not unusual for you to be home at late at night.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You hear a knock on the door. There's a couple of kids there. Your first instinct is going to be to help
use
these
your
kids.
telegraph?
Yeah, until they ask to use your telegraph. I don't know about you, but I don't have one of those.
Yeah, I don't. My house is not wired for that. I'm sorry. But yeah, what are you going to do? I mean, they're kids.
Yeah.
Now, I will say in today's society, if they were more of the age of teenagers, 16 or 17, I might be a little bit more reluctant. But again, like if an 8-year-old, 9-year-old kid
a little
shows
kid.
up, I mean, that's innocence.
And again, maybe that's, if this is just an urban legend, maybe that's the origin of it. Maybe that's the wisdom behind it. Don't let strange kids in your house. Because in this day and age, can you even trust kids?
Right. Right.
Especially, I don't want to sound like a grumpy old man, but them pesky teenagers, you don't know what they're into these
Get
days.
off my lawn.
Yeah. You'd be more inclined to yell, "Get off my lawn," if they're standing out there terrifying you with their jet black eyes.
Well, it's went from they go to the door, they beat on the side of the house, they beat on the windows, everything from they almost get demanding to like the beautiful girl, very polite, well-natured. I mean, the stories are kind of everywhere. It's interesting, the different takes on them.
Well, they've crept in the pop culture. I watched a movie not that long ago with my son called They Come Knocking on Hulu. It's a Hulu original, and that's the whole story. Is this family on vacation has a run-in with these black-eyed kids. I kind of thought that was what it was going to be when I turned it on, but I was sort of pleasantly surprised to see that's what it was. Now they do stray from the lore a little bit, but even in that movie, you've got a family camping. They've got a camper that they're staying in, and then in the middle of the night there's a knock on the door, and there's a little kid there about 8 years old. Hey, can I come in and use your phone? Dressed in a hoodie and jeans. I mean, they follow a lot of the stereotypes in that movie, so it's definitely something that's crept into the culture. But that black eye, the jet black eye, I've read multiple places that's sort of a universal fear of humanity. If you take a picture of someone with jet black eyes and you show them anywhere in the world, even to people that are totally unexposed to technology in any way, so they have no way of interacting with this story, it still terrifies them. That's why, like I said, the image of the gray alien is so
I think,
unsettling.
to me at least, if you see a human, I won't say alien, but if you see a human with black eyes, it's like soulless.
Yeah.
You definitely think
there's
of
an evil there.
an evil, undeadish, And we touched on that too. There was some that had the musty, mildewy smell. Not always, not in all the stories, but in some of them. I don't know. I'm kind of torn on this. I love vampires, so I'm kind of drawn to want to tie it to.
I want to see the connection to vampire, but at the same time, my connection is almost more of a otherworldly, alien type thing.
Well, and I will say, I mean, let's face it, vampire children are like non-existent. So why would they all be children?
Let's kind of, we want to talk about the X-Files a little bit. When they were infected with the alien virus, their eyes turned black in the X-Files.
That's true.
And again, we said that the story started in the 80s, but the first known documented case was the gentleman in Abilene, Texas in 96. That was the first story to pop up on the internet. So,
well, and I read when I was doing some of the research, the reference to children was little beings, and throw back in that whole, the dark fae.
Yeah.
The fae are considered little beings. Yeah. And of course, with Irish and folklore, Celtic folklore, they were notorious shapeshifters. But again, why all of a sudden, like in the 90s, is this just kind of cropped up? I mean, because like you said, there's hundreds, if not thousands of stories out there. If you start down this rabbit hole.
There's a lot more stories on there we didn't even touch on. I found lists of encounters. And again, they say it started as a creepypasta and sort of grew from there, and an urban legend, whatever. But you can reach back in mankind's history, and like you said, with the stories of the Fae and things like that. Well, there are stories of encounters with otherworldly beings that are they make you feel uncomfortable. They're there to take something from you. They're there to hurt you. And sort of the lesson is that you don't open your door to people you don't know.
If these creepy kids come knocking at your door, guys, don't open the door. Just don't open the door.
Definitely. Don't let the black-eyed kids in.
Nothing else out of this podcast today, don't open the door.
So you've got these unsettling kids. If you encounter them, don't open the door for them. Yeah, I mean, obviously from the stories we recounted today, letting them in the house, that's the last thing you want to do. So I guess just stay safe.
Stay safe.
And avoid the black-eyed kids.
And this is yet another story that you'll find. Nightmares on the Lost Highway. I would like to thank Alex Tudor, who has been helping us a lot with our endeavors on this podcast.
You could call him our producer at this point, I think.
Our producer, electronic recording technician. He's the one that's setting up all the mics and the hardware in the background. And then Bill Weirs is going through, taking his time to try to clean and edit this up and give us the best possible version that we can present to you folks. Want to thank everybody involved with that. Also would like to say, if you're interested in taking a listen to our local band, Phantom Sam, who has provided our Nightmares on the Lost Highway theme song, if you will, we will be sharing a link on our Facebook page. If you would love to go check out their unique sound, they've got some wonderful stuff going on. So we appreciate our support for us, and also we would appreciate support for them as well. Thank you very much.